Literary analysis, the most common form of essay in the high school English classroom. But what is it? Let's break it down. Literary means the writing, study, or content of literature, especially that which is related to quality of form. Analysis is a detailed examination or study of something, so as to determine its nature, structure, or essential features. Put both definitions together and you get the study of literature to understand its meaning. Well, you probably already knew that. The purpose of this breakdown is to show you an example of literary analysis at work. The most important part about a literary analysis is the ability to break a subject into pieces, to study those pieces, and then further develop the meaning of the work as a whole. While the examination of those components is necessary, as we'll discuss in a moment, the main thing to remember when writing a literary analysis is that you are constructing an argument about what you believe the work means. Any good debater knows that in order to convince people, you need evidence to back up your claim. But what exactly do we mean when we say evidence? What is literary evidence, and how do you look for it?
Literary evidence could be anything from diction or word choice, metaphor, symbolism, description, tone, mood, plot, setting, narration, characterization, genre, irony, ambiguity. Oh God.
But before you get overwhelmed, it is important that you don't need to look for all of those things when you're looking for evidence. You want to focus on the things that relate back to your main point.
Let's practice. This is a stanza selected from Robert Frost's poem, The Road Not Taken. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference.
If you want to argue that the road is a metaphor for life, and the split in the road is a life choice, you might want to examine the notion of time. The narrator says that he will be recounting these life choices later on in his life. If the road were a literal road, why would it matter so much to him? Unless, of course, the road was a life choice that brought him to a different lifestyle. You might discuss his emotion with a sigh. What does that mean, and how does that support your argument that the road is a metaphor? Therefore, your evidence would be in the form of word choice, metaphor, and emotion language. Any more and it could begin to get cluttered, overwhelming, and it could distract your audience from the point you're trying to make. While evaluating just one stanza of the poem, did your understanding change in some way? Perhaps it was obvious to you that the road was a metaphor, but now you can point to specific evidence in the text to support why you think that way. One thing to keep in mind while analyzing literature is that there is no real right or wrong answer. If you make a claim and you back it up with hard evidence, who's to say that your interpretation is wrong? Granted, your opinion is not the only one, so it is important that we respect others' opinions and learn from them. Constructing a literary analysis is all about critical thinking and perception. Some questions to keep in mind while you're reading a text are the who, what, where, how, and why questions. Who wrote the text? What does the text mean? Where does the text take place? How did the writer construct the poem, argument, or claim? And more importantly, why did the writer write this?
To reinforce what we just discussed, a literary analysis is the breaking down of a work of literature to construct an argument about the meaning of a work.
So now you have your claim, and you have your evidence. But what's next? How do you actually format the paper? An essay is composed of three major parts: the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. But we'll begin with the introduction. The introduction has two major purposes: to hook the reader and to present your claim. The claim is your argument, the entire main point of your paper, the thesis. What is a thesis, you ask? We'll tackle that concept in a moment. After the hook, but before you introduce your main argument, you can provide context for your readers. A brief sentence or two describing the part of text that you will be focusing on can help guide your readers in the direction of your thesis that will appear later on in the introduction.
Take a look at this example presented by bucks.edu titled How to Write a Literary Analysis Essay. The setting of John Updike's story A and P is crucial to the reader's understanding of Sammy's decision to quit his job.
As readers, we are immediately confronted with the subject matter of the text that the writer will be focusing in on, the setting. Not only that, but we are confronted with questions. Questions like, why is the setting crucial? These questions will then be answered in your thesis. Again with the thesis, what is it? The thesis should be a declarative sentence strictly worded so as to present your argument in a clear and concise manner. It should make a statement about what you are trying to argue. But perhaps the most important thing to remember when cooking up a thesis is that you have to ask yourself, how debatable is my claim? Earlier when I said that there is no real right or wrong way to interpret literature as everyone has differing opinions, I want to springboard off of that here to say that it is a good thing if your argument can be argued with. The more debatable your thesis or main claim, the more enjoyable to read, and the more you have to talk about in your paper. If you merely summarize in your thesis, your readers might be able to agree. However, you'll have nothing to talk about, because what you just wrote in your essay can easily be gained from reading the text. It is just common knowledge. When writing your thesis, you want to present a claim that maybe no one has heard about before. Or, if they have heard about it, maybe they disagree, because then you spend the entire rest of your paper trying to prove your point, trying to argue why they should listen to you, why it's important, and how it might give them a better understanding of the literature. We'll go over examples of good theses and introductions in a moment. For now, let's pretend we have our thesis. How do we begin going over the body of the essay?
The body of an essay is the support of your essay. Think of it as a spine. The body is where you want to prove why your claim, or thesis, is valid. In order to do so, we need to organize our paragraphs as such. 1. Topic sentence. 2. Textual evidence. And 3. Concluding sentence.
Essentially, it should look like the layout of a paper, but slimmed down to a miniature version. To begin, your topic sentence isn't like your thesis. You don't want to reinstate your main claim. You want to present your first bit of textual evidence and explain why it relates or supports your idea, your argument. Always, always, always tie the topic sentence back to your thesis. Your topic sentence should introduce textual evidence to support your literary claim. By deviating from this or by not providing a clear topic sentence, the essay can unravel fast. When in doubt, return to your thesis. When not in doubt, return to your thesis. Just return to your thesis, no matter what. Now, it is better to have a tightly wound package of small but deep textual analysis than a comprehensive guide of every symbol you found in the book. Once you've established your topic sentence, you want to move on to the textual evidence. This can be in the form of metaphor, rhyme, meter, direct quotation, discussions of favorite scenes. It doesn't matter. The point is, after that, you want to make sure that you do what?
Tie it back to your thesis.
Tie it back to your thesis.
If you say, Robert Frost's poem is about the journey of life because of his line, ages and ages hence.
You won't be explaining why that line is important. Consider contemplating why Frost used this line specifically. Is there any other language in the text to support the idea of time, of life, of decision making? This is where you're going to want to transition into your other textual evidence. Finally, the concluding sentence of the paragraph should reinstate what you came up with from this textual evidence in the paragraph, as well as transitioning into the next body paragraph where you will therefore proceed to give more textual evidence to support your thesis. Now you've written your thesis. You've written your body. You feel solid about the paper, and there's not much more for you to write about. What do? Time to conclude your paper. The conclusion of an essay is meant to wrap up your paper. However, that does not mean finishing it off with a little bow on top. You should not be summarizing in your conclusion. But then, how do you end your paper? Before we tackle the do's of your conclusion, we really got to tackle some don'ts. As I just said, don't summarize. It becomes redundant and cue reader eye roll. The reader just read all that you had written in your essay. If they forgot that fast, they can go back and reread the bulk of your essay. Don't use ending phrases like in conclusion. It becomes cliche, and the more you practice with writing, the more you should be able to establish a conclusion where the reader goes, ah, that's the conclusion, without you having to point it out. Don't suggest that there are better interpretations out there. Simply put, be confident in your work, even though this can sometimes be difficult. Especially if you're furiously finishing that stupid paper your English teacher made you write. Who said that? Your conclusion should really be about showing you and your reader how far you both have come. It should not be summarizing or copying your thesis, because that doesn't show development or growth. Whew! That is a lot to take in. Not to worry, we will be going over the parts of an essay in greater detail in the upcoming days. For now, here are the key terms that you need to take away from this essay. Lecture.
A literary analysis is a study of a literary work to understand its meaning. A paper is composed of three major parts: the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. The thesis is found in the introduction. A thesis is a carefully worded sentence that lays out the claim you are about to make. Always use textual evidence to support your claim. And no matter what, always tie everything back to your thesis.
I will be giving you examples of good introductions, body paragraphs, and conclusions in the upcoming classes. But for now, we have to rewind. Because you can't take an approach to an argument if you don't know what you're arguing about. Therefore, in the last few minutes of this lecture, we will be tackling an example of a good thesis and tackling an example of a bad thesis, and highlighting what makes them good and what makes them subpar.
The first essay is an example from the AP Literature and Composition exam. This essay was awarded a 9, the highest score on the exam. If we look at the introduction, the writer gives us a brief summary of the language Shakespeare employs, while also defining a key topic in the essay, misogyny. But it is only when we reach the final sentence that we get what the writer is trying to communicate. The writer's thesis invokes the shallow values of the male characters and uses these values to delineate the sexism in the play. Why does this thesis work, then? The thesis is clearly defined, as seen here. It also highlights the shallow values of the male perpetrators. The writer is clear, declarative, and concise in this sentence. We know that he or she will be arguing that the male characters have poor values. Not only that, but the writer incorporates it into a greater theme, misogyny.
The second essay we will want to look at received a score of 3. Let's find out why.
So can we pinpoint what the writer is trying to argue? Not really, because the main thing they have done in this introduction is summarize. Telling us Iago is cruel to Cassio, Rodrigo, and Othello doesn't say anything about what approach they will be taking, what they will be discussing, or why it matters that Iago is cruel. The final sentence brings us closer, but the writer does not explain how the cruelty, or Iago, relates to the theme of betrayal, and why that theme of betrayal is important.
So there you have it. 2 essays, one with a clear thesis statement and one with mixed directions. These examples allow you to see the benefits of establishing a good thesis in the introductory paragraph early on, because it helps guide the rest of your essay. As an activity for the class, we will be reading and annotating the Robert Frost poem I presented from earlier, and then we will be constructing our own theses based on these annotations. Not to worry, you will only be writing the introduction, not the whole paper. Yet. So pull out your paper and pens, and I will see you in class ready to write those introductions.